Welcome back, everyone. Mr. Talbot here for you. We're going to be finishing up our developments in Dar al-Islam notes today. So again, remember, we want to be making sure we're using the notes that we've already done with the reading, because this doesn't replace the reading. Kind of just gives you a little bit of quick review to go over it. So we kind of last left off. We kind of set the stage for how Islam has spread, how far it has spread. Now we're going to kind of look at, what was life like during this time. So we kind of look at our historical development. And part of the reading and other things we're going to look at also Judaism and Christianity. For this video, we're really just going to focus on Islam because it is the dominant power in Dar al-Islam, of course. So one group we want to talk about is the Sufis. And so these are Muslims, and they don't focus so much on the Quran as much as they focus on kind of self-examination. And if I hadn't been stupid, you would be able to see the whole book here, but it's kind of the belief in self-realization, kind of looking inwards to figure out, the best way to live. But they are still Muslim. And so these Sufis, what's going to kind of be their big role is that because they're not as literal translation on the Quran, they're going to be kind of more flexible in looking at local customs and stuff and integrating Islam into those local customs. That makes it a lot more popular, and it's going to lead to a lot more people converting to Islam. One thing that kind of makes Islam unique compared to what we studied in East Asia, where it's kind of merchants were somewhat looked down upon in China because, you're kind of just getting stuff out of other people. You're not really making anything yourself. That's not really what goes on in Islam. And a big reason, kind of maybe theory behind that, is that Muhammad himself was a merchant. So he's going to kind of view that in a better light, as are people that follow him. And the other thing is we got to remember kind of the geography of the situation here. I mean, we're talking Islam starts here in, what is today's Saudi Arabia? It's in the Middle East. It's in the middle of all these trade routes. So this region is going to get really, really wealthy during the time period because it has lots and lots of money. And people aren't just trying to survive. We're going to see a lot of investment into the arts and into academics and into building things like universities and supporting scholars and mathematicians and all that kind of stuff that if you were just trying to survive, you wouldn't be putting your resources in that. But the Middle East and Dar al-Islam as a whole is doing so well, especially the people towards the top, they're able to put money towards those kind of things. That's going to have a big impact on things as we go forward. Now, one of the things that's being traded, and we're going to look a lot more at this in class, is slaves. Now slavery has sadly been going on for pretty much every civilization up to this point, and we're going to see going through this point for centuries to come still. And another sad part is Africa is going to be our exploited group mainly. Now, the Muslims and what we kind of call the East slave trade, they're kind of pulling slaves from a lot of other areas, but definitely going to, as we kind of see, this trade route going down here into West Africa, that's bringing out gold, but it's bringing out a lot of slaves with it. We don't have as good a data on this as we're going to have for the Atlantic slave trade, which is where slaves are being brought by the Europeans to the Americas. But a lot of historians think there were as many people being transferred and put into slavery during the Eastern slave trade as we're going to see in the Atlantic slave trade. Now, I think we're going to see when we study that slavery is always terrible, but it probably was going to be worse when we get to the Atlantic slave trade. But I'm going to leave that kind of up to you to decide as we kind of research these things. Next kind of thing we're going to look at kind of is what's kind of going on with the women in Dar al-Islam. Now, there's a lot of debate today over things like Sharia law and, kind of the limiting of rights with women. And, we've seen, it took a long time for women to even be allowed to drive. In some places, they still can't. Certainly, we've seen things like the Taliban in Afghanistan, big reduction of women's rights. But for this video, and we're going to kind of focus on kind of what's going on in our time period. In our time period, women across the world are kind of victims of this patriarchy system. That's true in Dar al-Islam as well. If they went to court, their testimony wasn't viewed as favorably as a man's testimony. But there are some little things that make women a little bit better off than they are in other places. They're allowed to inherit property. This is going to allow them to kind of get more into business. They're occasionally, it's pretty rare, but occasionally allowed to look into divorce, and they wouldn't lose all their stuff if they were in a divorce. So these are good things. There's not enough of it during this time period, but comparatively to what we're going to see going on in Europe and what we saw in China, there's more rights for women, which is very, very positive. Now, there are kind of expectations of dressing modestly, and that's one for men too, but certainly more applied to women. And a lot of it, so we think of kind of the hijab as a very thing specific to Islam and to Muslims, and certainly is today. But it wasn't invented by Muslim. It had been going on before Muhammad was alive, and kind of the Byzantine Empire around, Turkey and the Balkans. But kind of still a legacy we see going forward today. Now, if I could emphasize one thing out of this unit, this is the slide. It is kind of the big thing that, everyone that likes being intelligent and likes studying history, we owe an immense debt of gratitude to the Muslim scholars of this time out of Dar al-Islam. Like I said, lots of money going through this region thanks to the trade. And that's going to lead to us being able to innovate in a lot of ways because, we got new ideas, we can spread them, and also taking new ideas, or old ideas, I should say, from places like Greece and from India and from China, and putting them all together and making things better. And so we're going to see them building libraries. The biggest one in the world is in that Muslim-controlled part of Spain. They estimate that there are 400,000 plus books in that. And remember, we don't have the modern printing press yet. So 400,000 would be a lot today. This is when a lot of books are still made by hand or just with that woodblock printing. We got big-time universities. Kind of the most famous one is going to be the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. Baghdad, in what is today Iraq, was the center of the Abbasid Empire. And the Muslims, part of the Quran is to kind of look outwards and see if you can find some good ideas. So there's this encouragement to look to China, to look to Greece, and they do that. And they're going to get these things, they're going to translate it mainly into Arabic, and they're going to take paper making techniques from the Chinese. They're going to take some math stuff from India. They're going to do their own great things in places like astronomy and math. The term algebra and algorithm come from some Arabic scholars and names. Trigonometry is owed to this guy here. He was so awesome that Google even gave him his own little SketchUp, Nasir al-Din al-Tusi. So big advancements in math. Advancements are going to be made in medicine as well. We got astronomy going. All these are great things. But the big thing is they're writing it all down. They're preserving it in these libraries. And meanwhile, the Europeans are in what they are going to call the Dark Ages, which they're still doing cool stuff too, but it's not nearly as impressive as the Muslims are doing. But the fact that, we have these Muslim scholars who are in part of Europe, in Spain, with the Moors, that's going to help lead to the European rebirth, which we're going to call the Renaissance. And that's going to lead to, global exploration, more trade, more good ideas. And all this, would have been either lost or really delayed if not for the work of these scholars that we see in Dar al-Islam. So kind of use what we took out of this video, apply it to your reading notes, and these should be things that we're keeping with us as we go forward in the class period. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.